Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'll be showing you how to turn an acrylic pen. In the previous video I showed you how to prepare all of them pen blanks, so if you're interested in that video, check it up. I'll leave a card in the top right corner. So let's get into the video. So to turn our pen blanks, we're going to be using this, which is a mandrel, and this one in particular has a Morse taper 1 on it. Now you can get all different sizes for this. You can get a Morse taper 2, pretty sure you can get 4 as well, and all the others. So you want to make sure when you look at your lathe that it has the correct Morse taper on it, because you don't want to buy the wrong one. So as you can see, there is a slight taper on the end of this mandrel, and this is just so it's got a better fit when it goes into the end of the headstock. So to fit the mandrel on the lathe, you simply just give it a nice shove into the end of the headstock, and that is nice and locked in there now. Now as you can see, we've got two little, I don't know what you call them, nuts or bolts that you can undo, which allow you to adjust the length of the mandrel. So if you've got a shorter pen, then you can bring this metal bar or rod a bit shorter, so it allows the thread on the end to tighten it up nicely. We won't be changing the metal rod on this one though, as this is set up for a slimline pen. First off, I'm going to remove all of the bushings, so take this off first, and the rest of them, obviously you can leave these two on at the front because you don't need to. You then grab your pen blank, and that simply slots over there. You then get your second bushing, which then will slot over there into the middle. You then get your next pen blank, which then slots over that one. You then slot the next bushing over here, so in total you've got 1, 2, 3, and the last bushing, and then finally thread on this brass wheel, which will allow you to tighten everything up, and hold down the mandrel while you do this, and this will allow it to stop these from spinning. You then need to push the tailstock up and align the mandrel and tighten the back of the lathe up. Now sometimes that locking mechanism, which is just around the back, may be at the front. Loosen this and spin the wheel at the back, and this just allows you to just tighten it up a bit while that's locked down obviously, and then tighten this up, which will tighten that up. So what I've noticed in the past is when you put this mandrel in, there's a bit of flex when it's not actually tightened up against this revolving center. Now as you can see, when I push my tailstock up against it, it doesn't quite go in the hole. Now I've noticed that before, but really there's nothing to worry about. It's not because your lathe isn't centered, it's just because there's a bit of flex with the mandrel. So the way to just get around this is just to pull it a bit and just push it up against it, and now that is running nice and true. And again, follow the steps as I just said and tighten it all up. So the final thing that we need to do is put the tool rest in, so I'm just using this small one, and this just slots in here and tighten up. However, you need to know how high to have this, so a good way to do this is to slide it up against here to your pen blanks. Grab whatever tool you're using, and for me it's going to be a roughing gouge. This is what I've always done it with, and it's just a nice little tool which is great for pens. Now as you can see, this is just a tad high. It's hitting the top and it's not hitting the middle, and really when you're holding this you want it to be at a low angle. You don't want to be holding up here. So the way that I normally set this is just by loosening this tightening mechanism and holding the tool on here to about the angle I'll be holding it at, and waiting until I hit the middle or just below it, and then I'll hold it there and I'll tighten it up. Now the other thing you need to take into account is how close you get to the pen blanks. Now the one thing you don't want to happen is for your tool to go down here and get stuck and jam, and anything could happen while the lathe is spinning. So you want to make sure you're close enough so that doesn't happen. What I would do is I'd move it in closer, and when you're setting this, is make sure that it can't go under. See, it's still going under, so you want to move it closer, and about there it's stopping. So when you've got this on here, you'd be holding it like that, and look, it's just on center, so that this is about perfect. So if you think this is getting too small once you're getting this round, then you're going to have to move this closer so that doesn't happen. Once you're happy everything's tightened up, you're then ready to turn. So when turning, first I would recommend not going too fast, because this has still got square edges on here, and also it's good practice to put it on the bevel, so when you're going here you get a nice smooth cut. However, when roughing it out, is there much need? And in my opinion there isn't, because you're only going to remove that nice smooth cut you've done earlier. So really I would get it down to nice and round to start with, so that way then you can decide what shape you want to do, or try and get the smooth cuts that you need then. Otherwise, to me, it's a bit of a waste of time trying to get nice smooth cuts and then take them away straight afterwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rough this out, and I'm just going to lay the chisel on here, and the way you hold it is you put your finger under here, put the chisel on top, and just run along here like this. Now, if you're a bit worried, and I have had occasions like this in the past, the pieces that we have squared off, these will eventually come off. So you may like to come this way from the centre outwards, and this way as well, because that way it will stop you coming on from the end. And I've had occasions where the wing of this chisel has caught here and is broken it off, which I showed you in the preparing the pen planks video, where part of the pen has broken off and you can see the brass tube. You also want to make sure you have a nice sharp chisel while turning this, and for many years I just use a diamond file like this, which are, I think they're about £8 or something, so they're not that expensive. And all you do is you lay the bevel on and you keep this at the same angle, and you just go like that. And obviously it's a bit hard to do it like this because the camera's in the way, but as you can see, you just work your way around, putting a burr back on, and it may go a bit blunt quite quickly, but for many years that's all I had to use. And like, I'm fortunate now to have a Tormek. However, if you don't, and you don't have the money to spend on that, then I would highly recommend one of these. So when setting the speed for the lathe, you want to make sure that you first turned the variable speed all the way down, because you could have been polishing up on the previous bowl you just turned, and you don't want this to go flying at a really crazy speed, and as I said, anything can happen. So first, turn your speed down before you actually turn the lathe on. And as you can see, that's running quite slow, so we want to go a bit faster than that. So I would start turning it up until it sounds, and you can feel it's vibrating a bit, so you can kind of hear it now. So this at the moment is on about 1,000, and I would leave it at that while you're turning. So as I said, I'm going to rough this out first, and I'm going to work from centre outwards. As you can see, take it nice and slow. And then I would go from the other side. You don't want to go shoving your chisel in at this point, because I find acrylic to be sometimes quite brittle. And as I said, it could just easily just come off, and it's so annoying when you've worked hard to try and glue this all up nicely and square the ends off, and for it to come flying off means that you're going to have to try and fix it, or grab another piece of acrylic, which means more money. Then you're going to have to glue another brass tube in, wait for that to go. So really do take your time while you are squaring these ends off and getting it nice and round. So once I've done this, I'll come back to you and we'll go to the next step. So as you can see, as we've been making this round, our chisel is now able to slot down here, which we don't want. And also, it's getting a lot harder to try and get this bevel in the centre, and we're having to lower the tool down a lot. And that's because we're making it smaller and the diameter is getting a lot smaller. So to fix this, the only thing we have to do is to loosen this and bring it up a bit higher. And again, I will just guess about there where the centre is, and then that has brought us back there. And also, as you can see, our chisel can no longer fit under here, which is what we want. So you want to make sure you keep checking this as often as possible. So I've almost got this round on here, but as you can see we're getting a lot of build up of all this acrylic here, especially in the centre. Now one thing to may come to mind is to grab your fingers while you're going on the lathe and just to try and pull it off. Now a way to avoid doing that is to use just a simple toothbrush. So if we just turn this on, and if you hold the toothbrush on here, it will just clear all that mess out there, and you won't have to get your fingers involved whatsoever, and it clears everything away. So as you can see, look, all nice and fresh just with a simple toothbrush. So just a quick tip, just in case you're having that problem, which you most likely are when turning acrylic. So I've rounded and roughed out the pen blanks on the lathe. As you can see, they're looking quite nice and smooth. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to get this nice smooth cut with the chisel, and the way we're going to do that is by putting the bevel on. So when trying to get a smooth cut, the first thing you want to do is just to lay your chisel on that, as I did before. And as you can see, we've got a bevel here as well, and that will ride along with the pen blank. So the first thing you want to do is to get the bevel on and start pushing with it. And if you're not getting any cuts, then I would start coming away from the bevel just a little bit this way, just to see until you get that nice smooth cut. And you'll know you're getting a nice cut because the sound will be a lot more quieter than when you were roughing it out. And also you'll see a really nice line come across here, and you can also feel it. You can feel how smooth that cut was when you were taking it. So as you can see here, we're putting the bevel on straight on, and it's not cutting it, it's not getting there, and that's because it's not near the tip. So what we do is we start pulling it away a bit until you start to see a cut. So that's picking up a little bit, still not much though. And there you go, we're cutting now, or nearly. And there you go, our cut's going. So you want to keep this nice and consistent. It's a lot of practice getting used to, and I'm not amazing at it either. But as you can see, there's a nice line coming across here. Now it helps to have your finger under here because it allows you to slide it along as you're going. If you hold it like this, you can still get a nice cut with it, but I find it more difficult to control. So when you put this on here, just take it easy and go across. Now if your blank isn't exactly flat, then you're going to end up coming off, because if you can see here, the diameter of it is a lot smaller than here. So if we were to go this way, you see it stops cutting. That's because there's nothing there to cut. But once we get down to the same level as over here, you'll be able to get a nice long stretch of cut along the whole thing. So just keep practicing, and you want to make sure you can do it from both ways. So there you go, you see how nice them shavings are. They're not chunky, they're not long strands, they're just tiny little shavings of the acrylic, and this is how you know you're getting a nice smooth cut. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start shaping my pen. So you can do any shape you want. However, as a beginner, if you're just starting off, I would just recommend doing the basic curve on each end, as it's quite a simple one to do, and actually it's still quite challenging, because the next thing you've got to try and do, the first one's easy, but then you've got to match it to this one. So that's where your eye comes in quite handy, and trying to see if they look the same. So what I'm going to do now is start shaping this curve. And to do that, I'm just going to start my way at the front and push this way and work my way back halfway from the middle and come back again, and then to the middle and start going to the end. And that's the same for the other side. So I'm going to start here. Push there, then go about halfway of that back. Push there. And again, we're getting a lot of build up there again, so what I'm going to do is get my toothbrush, get all that out. So now I've got a nice clean bit again so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go back to the middle. You can't hear it cutting at all. Anyway, so now we've got that bit, so you want to match it on both sides. So now I'm going to go from this side and do the exact same thing. So push off the end, come back halfway, I'm going to come back again halfway, And that is that side done. And again, you've got all these bunches here, so I'll grab me toothbrush and try and get this all off. Now, if it's really difficult to get off, then your best bet to do is just to stop the lathe and take it off like that. Now, as you can see, I've already started to get that shape that I want, and I'm going to keep bringing this down until I hit these two bushings here, and this will determine the diameter of the pen tip that will eventually go on to one of these ends. So it's really just as simple as that. You just keep working your way down here and down here, and yes, you can come up this way as well. You just got to be careful that you don't catch the wing on this end, as you don't really want it to come flying off, and it's a bit of a pain, as I said, if it does as well, because then you've got to try and get another acrylic or whatever you want to do. Anyway, I'm going to carry on shaping this down here and down here, so we have this nice, I don't know what you call it, like curve to the top, and it's nice pen to hold. As you can see, we're getting this nice smooth finish, and when we sand this with sandpaper later and polish it with some of these micro mesh pads that I will show you, it will just really pop, and it'll be really nice and shiny. So I'm going to carry on with this, and I will update you once I have done this one. As you can see, I have nearly got this to the shape I want, and I'm almost down to these bushings here. So I don't really want to go much further, and I'm quite happy with the shape. Now, I also want to try and get these down a bit more and get it a bit more of a smoother finish. Now, a way to do this, especially with this tool, is that you can use this as a scraper, and you can push the top of the gouge up against here and just run it round gently, and you'll see that you can get some really nice shavings, and it won't give you a rough cut at all. So as you can see, we're getting some really nice tiny shavings of this, and this also helps level out any bumps you've got within your pen or any other dips. So just gently push it around it, and you're able to level everything out and get a really nice shape. So as you can see, we've got a really nice smooth finish now, just from doing it like that. This one is now pretty much turned. Now, I say pretty much because I'm going to turn this one down first to a similar shape like this, and if I'm able to match it perfectly, then great. If not, then I may have to tweak this slightly and try and get them as best lined up as I can. So before taking it down any thinner, if I do want it any thinner, then I would turn this one down first, just so if something does happen and maybe this one's a tad thinner, and you have room to make this thinner as well, and you don't want to be hitting the brass tube obviously, because that won't be good, and it will just ruin the whole look of it. So I'm not too sure if you're able to see, but this side is slightly lower than this side, so that's why I didn't go all the way down to start with this side, as I can correct this and match them up with this. But they're pretty much done now, as you can see, and they're really nice pattern. You do get some nice patterns with acrylic. So I'm just going to take this down a bit with the chisel, just using that scraper method I showed you earlier, and then it's time for sanding. Right, so I've got them all the same, pretty much the same, and now, well, I'll get rid of all these shavings first, and I am going to take the tool rest out, move this out of the way. We are ready to start sanding. Now, when sanding these, I've always been taught to wet sand it. So you get your little strip of sandpaper. Now, this is where these come in really handy. You can get these from Axminster is what I showed you in my workshop tour video, which I'll put a link to in the top right corner now, or a little card. Anyway, these are great for sanding little pen blanks, stuff like this, because they're not too big. You want a little bucket of water just to keep dipping your sandpaper in, and that way you keep this nice and wet while sanding, and it does a much better job. Now I'm going to work from 150 grit up to 400 grit, and then after that I'll show you how to use the micro mesh pads. Now before you start your wet sand, it's ideal to put some sort of towel or cloth below the bed of your lathe so you don't ruin it. So now we're going to start sanding it. So the way I sand is just to put your finger under here and rub it along here. Now you can also hold it like this while you're going along. If you go like this, because this is the way the lathe spins, it sometimes kind of like pushes it away, so it's a bit more awkward. So either holding it like that with your finger under it allows you to get pressure on it, whereas if you just hold it like this, really you're just pulling it and there's no pressure from your finger. So I would recommend holding it like this, or put your finger under it as well and going like this. Now 150 grit is almost like cutting still. It's a bit like a chisel. It's not doing it as quickly, but you want to be careful. However, if you've got some bits which aren't quite the same, then you can go over it a bit harder and it should hopefully align it, which is what I've found, which has been helpful in the past. Anyway, so when sanding this, you want to have it on about 600 speed, and you want to keep making sure your sandpaper is nice and wet. So I will show you how to do that now. So you first want to just turn it on and bring it down to 600 speed. You don't want to wet your sandpaper, as you can see it's a bit more wetter, and you just go over your blanks like this, nice and thoroughly. Now as you go up the grits, you shouldn't have to do this as much. I like to do this for a good amount of time because it allows me to reshape any bits that I haven't quite got right. So just go all the way along this, holding your finger along it, and when it gets all clogged up, as you can see it's clogged up a bit, just put it back in the water, it will clear all the mess off, and now you've got a nice fresh piece of sandpaper. So I'm going to sand these pen blanks up and come back to you once I have done the first sand. So as you can see, I've started to sand this. This is already done at 150 grit, and you'll start to find that not scratches, but some films starts to build over it. Now a way to see and make sure you're still keeping it identical is just to dip your fingers in some water and just rub it over it, and you can see it clears it all up, and it's a lot easier to tell your progress. There we go. So we can see now it's nice and shiny, and that is only with 150 grit. So imagine what it will be like once we go to like 12,000 grit with them micro mesh pads. So I'm going to work through the 240, 320 and 400, and once I've done that I'll show you how to use the micro mesh pads. So now I've sanded this up to 400 grit. As you can see, we've got a really nice shine. A thing that I forgot to mention last time was that you want to make sure that these pen blanks are nice and flush with your bushings. Otherwise, if they're not, then you won't get a nice flush joint when you press all the pen tips together. So these are the micro mesh pads. It's a bit hard to see on camera the colours, however they work from 1500 grit to 12,000 grit. If you were to buy these yourself, you'd probably be able to see them a lot easier, and also, I mean, they're quite hard to see anyway because the tab they come with, which tells you what colours to put in all, are really difficult to see. They're really similar. However, what you do is you dunk these in water and just rub it over the pen blank as we did with the sandpaper, and it allows you to just buff it up and build it up as you go through the grits. So what I'll do is I'll show you the first one, and then obviously it will just be the same thing throughout the rest, and then hopefully we'll be left with a pen and we can press it together. So the first grit we're going to use is 1500. So you simply turn the lathe on, and I put it on about, I don't know, 800, because you slowly build the speed up as you go. With my lathe, the lowest belt being from 500 to 1300, it limits me from going any higher, and I can't be able to change the belts. Make sure you've got the pad nice and wet. Turn the speed up a bit and just go like this all over it. Make sure you get right in to where the bushings are and go all around it. I would do this for about 30 seconds for the first one. No reason, just, I don't know, just what I've done, and it just, you know, the first one just allows you to really start off buffing it. That's the first one done, and then you move on to the next grit and do the exact same thing. Make sure your fingers are behind it, so you're actually putting some pressure onto it and not just holding it like this where, you know, it hasn't got anything to hold on to. So I'm going to go through all these grits and work up to the 12,000 one, and then I'll show you the results afterwards. As you can see, we've got a really nice shine now just from going up to that 12,000 grit. So now I will show you how to press the pen together. So this is what the pen kits come in, just in a little bag. So take these all out and lay them out in the direction you want it to do. So I'll show you how they exactly go together. So this is how to lay it out when you've got your pen kit out. So the first step is to press these two together. Now before doing that, you want to make sure that you've got the acrylic aligned in a really nice way, and the pattern flows nicely, or however you would like it to be. You know, you don't want to just go whacking it together and hoping it looks alright. You know, you want to look at the acrylic and think, which way does that look best, and how is it going to match up the best. So first I'll take you to the vise and I'll show you how to press this together. So when pressing this together, you first want to press the nib end, or the bit where the pen comes out of, together. And I've put pieces of plywood here because I don't want to start like pressing holes in me wood and messing it all up. So I've just got some scraps of ply. So the simplest way to do this is just to keep it as straight as you can. Like, I've tried so many times and it never just happens like that. You have to keep adjusting it, and it's just luck really. So just keep going until you feel like it's going to go in nicely. Hopefully get there, just like this. There we go, and we're in. That's tight, nice and tight. Give it a bit of a tighten, and that is that first bit pressed in, looking cool. This is the next bit you press in, and that goes in to the end like that. So I unwind the vise, and there's a little tiny groove here, and you want to stop at that point. Oh, that one went in first time, so you just can't guarantee. And keep going until you hit that bit there. So you want to stop that now, and that is that one done. You can slot this bit over it now if you want. These are a pain as well to get over. Ugh. There we go. As you can see, we've pressed this end in, and we've pressed the tip in, and we've slid over this little movie thing. I don't really know what you call it. So something went wrong there. Didn't quite film it. I don't know. I must have pressed off instead of on. Anyway, just to recap this bit, just press the end in as we've done the others. So that just lies in here. Tighten it up and make sure you cover the clip with something that isn't quite that interesting. Like, it's quite nice this side. However, this side, there's a bit of a gap here of pattern, so I would cover the clip end with this. So we've got our two ends pressed together, and the final step is to thread the actual pen cartridge through. So that just comes through here, and it's got a little thread on it, and you want to see how far it protrudes. Yes, as you can see, that is protruding enough. So when you twist this mechanism at the back, it is going to stay clear. Now, if we'd have done the brass tube and squared it off too much, then this nib would still be protruding and you wouldn't have a flat surface at the top. So that's why you don't square the brass tube off too much. So you just twist this at the bottom and it comes through the top. So the final step is just to press the clip on. So just carefully press over like that, and it should just press on easy, and there is your pen, and you twist the back and the pen comes out. Turned out really nice. I added the chrome pen kit with it. You can get gold as well, and many other types of colours. Next video, it will be showing you how to turn a bullet pen. Exactly the same. If anything, I think it might be a bit easier. But yes, that's all for today, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.